What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they made a move yesterday that lit the internet on fire, and obviously we got to talk about it. Scotty Miller is in town for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, I knew you thought I was talking about Phil Jurkovec, but we'll talk about that as well. But there's another name out there, a name that might bring a little bit of interest to the Pittsburgh Steelers that we should at least address and question whether or not the Steelers should bring him in as an option this offseason, because quite frankly, nobody has any idea what the hell this team is doing when it comes to the wide receiver position. We'll answer some questions as always, and an update on Cole Holcomb that might be a little concerning for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's been a rainy, but a really nice couple of days here in the Burgh. Rookie minicamp is tomorrow. We get some football finally. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling great. Not only do we get rookie minicamp, but we get skiing Saturday for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So,
True.
a fellow mustache brother is coming up to the MLB level. So I'm excited for that. And I'm excited for some actual football like you and Steven talked about yesterday. Maybe not, NFL Sundays, but more than we've been getting the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's something. Like, you get to go out there, you get to watch some people throw some footballs, catch some passes. I mean, that's all that's at the end of the day, I could care less. Like, I don't care. It's better than the NFL Combine, because the NFL Combine, people are like, oh, actual football. Like, it's not. Rookie minicamp, at least you get to see some dudes hit some pads. You're in the South Side, which is great. Just the atmosphere is there. Plus, you get your first look at some guys that I think impress. You usually get a good understanding. I mean, George Pickens looked like, oh gosh, this guy's going to be phenomenal about 30 seconds into rookie minicamp. This year, I think Roman Wilson's got a shot to do that. I think Peyton Wilson's got a shot to impress. I'm excited to see what John Rice Plumlee brings to the show. And then obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers are bringing in Phil Jurkovec. For anybody who hasn't found out yet, that the Pittsburgh Steelers are bringing in Phil Jurkovec, and that is a massive addition to this rookie minicamp roster. Before we dive into some real football here, because Scotty Miller is coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers, we got to talk about that and what it means, and whether that's the end of the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver signings, because quite frankly, it can't be. And if it is, well, there's some serious issues, and maybe we have to reevaluate how we look at Omar Khan to a full extent. Phil Jurkovec coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's lay out what the Pittsburgh Steelers tight end room could look like if this dude somehow pulls it off, makes the roster. Pat Freiermuth, who is a phenomenal pass catcher, possibly one of the top pass catching tight ends in the NFL. A lot of people label him as a slot wide receiver. I think he fits the bill. Travis Kelce type, phenomenal. That's what you're looking for. Excellent. Connor Hayward, who is almost exactly a slot receiver. Can't see him lining up on the offensive line at all. And for everybody saying he's a fullback, he's not a fullback. So more like a slot receiver. Darnell Washington, who's pretty much a left tackle, and a good one. Damn good right tackle, left tackle, whoever, but a tackle. And then Phil Jurkovec, who's a quarterback. So that's an excellent top of the line tight end room if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm loving it, dude. I'm loving Phil Jurkovec. What do you give percentage Phil Jurkovec makes it to actual OTAs and minicamp?
Okay, I
over
thought
under 2%.
I thought you were going to say the roster. I'd say I have a better chance of making the actual roster than Phil Jurkovec. But to actually make it to OTAs and minicamp, still giving it like maybe 15-16%. This felt like more pity than anything, honestly. Like, that's, I'm not sure what Phil Jurkovec looks like as a tight end, but it can't be very impressive.
There's a lot of people that went to Pitt practices towards the end of the year that saw Phil Jurkovec playing tight end that weren't allowed to say anything about Phil Jurkovec playing tight end. And then Pat Narduzzi would be like, nah, he's not doing that. It's like, he is. We're watching him do it, actually. I'm going to say it's a 0% chance, but man, heck of a name. And I'm very excited to wish Steven was here yesterday when we were talking about guys who could possibly make the roster, because that would have been a good one. It would have been a good one to talk about, but we'll see. We'll find out tomorrow. I'll have highlights, no doubt about it. I will have highlights of Phil Jurkovec. Yesterday, the Pittsburgh Steelers, again, lit the internet on fire, signed Scotty Miller, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, former Atlanta Falcon, rejoins Arthur Smith here in Pittsburgh, along with Cordero Patterson. I mean, what's his name out of Atlanta, the tight end that I can never remember the name of. Thank you. On top of a couple of guys that have come the same way as Arthur Smith, with Arthur Smith to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I don't think any of it matters. He's coming off of an 11-catch season. He was almost a non-factor for the Falcons last year outside of 2 touchdowns, which 2 touchdowns and 11 passes, that's not terrible. Numbers are pretty good there, but you would have liked to see a little bit more. And while the Steelers fan base, everybody in the media, everybody's talking and waiting for a big, massive wide receiver move, the Pittsburgh Steelers to solidify their room and add somebody next to George Pickens, the Pittsburgh Steelers continue to do what they've done all offseason, and that is to sign a bunch of guys that have a very minimal shot to make the 53-man roster and almost no shot to impact the Pittsburgh Steelers. You saw Scotty Miller, because I got plenty of thoughts on the Scotty Miller signing. You saw Scotty Miller's name pop up as the next addition to the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver room, outside of the fact that he is 5'9", along with every other wide receiver in that locker room except for George Pickens and Van Jefferson. What were your thoughts?
My thoughts were just another name to add to the 4th wide receiver competition. I mean, it's Quez Watkins versus now Scotty Miller versus, Calvin Austin, I'd give a leg up to both of them, but at the same time, it's another non-impressive name and another name that, Omar Khan just wants to be able to cut as many wide receivers as possible by the time he gets to, training camp. So this is just another name that's going to say, all right, if he's better than one of these guys, sure. But at the end of the day, it's a 4th wide receiver, and I don't see him being anything more than that.
Yeah, no, I mean, fourth is generous. If we're being 100% honest, 4th is very generous. I don't see Scotty Miller making the Steelers roster. If he had punt return ability, cool. You're looking at Scotty Miller and saying this dude's a guy that is going to make some sort of impact, have some shot at making the team, because at least he could be a punt or a kick returner. Quez Watkins has that. Calvin Austin has that. Cordero Patterson has that. Scotty Miller does not have that. I think he took back 2 kicks last year. That was it. I mean, the most, I would say, underwhelming of all the underwhelming wide receiver signings this offseason, Scotty Miller tops that list. There's almost no shot that this guy makes the roster unless he comes out here and does something crazy, but I have a hard time believing that he's going to come out here and do something crazy. I don't understand where the Steelers' mindset is, because if you're looking for guys to compete for the bottom of the roster and potentially just be really good practice squad guys, you have a bunch of them. You have Marquez Callaway out of the Saints. You have Des Fitzpatrick, who spent last season in Pittsburgh and even made the roster at one point. You have Denzel Mims. Like, you have a bunch of guys who could fill your bottom of the depth chart practice squad spots and feel pretty good about it. There's no need to bring in another one. And how many slot guys can the Pittsburgh Steelers possibly need for a quarterback? Because if you want to talk about alarming things, Russell Wilson has a reputation of not utilizing the middle of the field. And I get it. The Steelers are going to look at it and say, yeah, that's not going to happen here in Pittsburgh. We're going to try our hardest to make sure that he does utilize the middle of the field. But if he doesn't, the Steelers are looking at a group of wide receivers that is the complete opposite of Russell Wilson's skill set. That is not something that you should be non-concerned with, because you should be very concerned with. Of all the good things that Omar Khan has done this offseason, his work in the wide receiver room has been the complete opposite of that. It's been like drastically concerning. That if you break it all down and you go, man, dude, he had a phenomenal draft. This is a second phenomenal draft. Phenomenal free agency. Omar Khan is killing it. That made a move with Deontay Johnson. And even then, like, I like Dante Jackson, and I think that if you got rid of Deontay because you were worried that he was going to hold out, then that makes a fair trade, and I think that works out. But since then, and I don't think that you need to have a plan in place when you trade Deontay. I think it was so early in the offseason that you could have just said, yeah, this is going to work out because we have so many options. Since then, the lack of execution on any option has brought major concern for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's a really good question here, because I've had this asked to me a number of times. Does Scotty Miller maybe just fit Arthur Smith's offense? I think Scotty Miller does fit Arthur Smith's offense, but I don't think he fits it any better than Calvin Austin or Quez Watkins. And I think both of those guys are already here. So why do you need a Scotty Miller? If you didn't have a Calvin Austin, you would need a Quez Watkins. If you didn't have a Quez Watkins, you would need a Scotty Miller. You have both of those guys. You don't need either of the other two. It just doesn't make much sense at all. Do you think that this is the end? Do you think that Scotty Miller was the finishing touch? This is it. here we go. It's George Pickens and a bunch of number 4s, and then Roman Wilson, whatever he turns into, which you got to be excited about it. But still, do you think the Steelers are done?
I think there's still a chance they're looking for something else. Again, I don't know if they trust Van Jefferson to be that outside guy that's going to be a starter for this team. I think when you look at what Scotty Miller and Quez Watkins are, you're going to get whoever's better, and competition's never a bad thing. But I do think that there's a position on this roster that still needs filled, or at the very least, you need competition for Van Jefferson, because he too, while being a guy that has formerly played for Arthur Smith, is not a guy that's overly impressive and not a guy that's going to be able to really take any attention away from George Pickens or Roman Wilson. He's not going to be a guy that's going to have a lot of attention devoted to him by opposing defenses. And I think you need to, at the very least, bring in somebody that's going to be competition for him in camp, because it's not going to be Watkins. It's not going to be Scotty Miller. So you need somebody else in that aspect. But outside of that, I'm not sure how much more they can do. The options, like you mentioned, have dwindled drastically.
Yeah, it is. You talk about it, everybody brings up, well, everybody's got these connections with Arthur Smith. I don't know why the Pittsburgh Steelers decided this was the direction they were going to go, but the Steelers decided they go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th best options in Arthur Smith's offense last year. There were 7 players who had better receiving numbers than Scotty Miller, who led the list above Van Jefferson, above Pratt, whatever, and above Cordero Patterson all last season. So they just went with hey, who are the worst guys out there? And it's not like the other guys weren't available. Mac Hollins was available. Mac Hollins had a decent year with the Falcons last year, 251 yards and 30 catches, played just 13 games. I mean, that's not terrible. You know, you could have brought in a Jonnu Smith who had 582 yards and 3 touchdowns. Didn't approach him. It just, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about the way they've approached this whole situation with the, hey, we're going to bring in familiar faces. I think that's more Tomlin than anything. You know, I get the Omar Khan thing, but I think Tomlin loves to have familiar faces. He loves to have guys who understand what's going on in the locker room, who understand each other, who make the transition easier for everybody else. He used to do this a couple of years ago. I mean, you got to remember that when the Steelers back in the day had like every brother they could possibly have in the NFL, and they still have a couple of them, but they also had teammates. Anytime they signed somebody, they'd sign somebody else from the same team just to be like, okay, just to make it an easier transition. I don't think they need to do that anymore. I think they could go away from that and just say, okay. And they've done it this year. I mean, Deshaun Elliott and Patrick Queen, great example. You know, you got 2 guys who played together who are now here on the Pittsburgh Steelers and presumed starters for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that's a Tomlin thing more than an Omar Khan thing. When I look at where they go from here, I don't think that Scotty Miller makes the roster, and I don't think he's a guy who is expected to make the roster. I think, just like you said, he's competition. The Steelers need competition. They're looking for competition. They need somebody to push everybody else to see who the best guys are. I think that they still believe a trade is possible at some point this offseason, and they just want to stack up to have enough guys to take reps during training camp before that trade happens, before they say, okay, Treylon Burks is coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Cortland Sutton's coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers, whoever is coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before that happens, I just think they need guys to take reps. And I don't think that they want, you know, guys like Denzel Mims to be taking reps or Des Fitzpatrick to be taking a bunch of reps. They want guys who have actual playing experience, who make NFL rosters, because you could say, hey, Denzel Mims is a former 2nd-round pick. Yeah, cool. Scotty Miller still has an upper hand on that guy. Why? Because Scotty Miller makes NFL rosters. Denzel Mims doesn't. That's the difference. So I think that they're looking at it as a right now thing and not a later thing. I still expect a trade to go down, and I think these are just filler pieces before then. If they do not, you want to talk about, you know, we've talked about like, hey, everything's going to work out just fine. George Pickens, blah, blah, blah. I believe that until George Pickens gets hurt, until something happens to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, which happens every year. I mean, Deontay went down last year. George Pickens turns into a superstar, becomes, hey, this guy could be a number 1, easy. The Steelers don't have that option this year. If somebody goes down, they're left completely stranded at the wide receiver position. And it happens every year. This is the NFL. Players get hurt. They get hurt all the time. And sometimes it's freak accidents. Sometimes it's a hamstring, especially at the wide receiver position. You just can't look at guys and say, we're going to bank on George being our only superstar and nobody behind him, and that's going to be okay. And I think the Steelers believe that, which is going to force their hand, which is, just to bring a full circle. I know I'm rambling, just to bring a full circle. I think the Steelers are going to force their hand to a trade no matter what, but it might not be the guys that they thought it would be at the beginning of this, where it was Cortland Sutton, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, so on and so forth. I think the Steelers will get to a point come training camp where they will look at it and just say, who can we trade for? It doesn't matter what that name is or if that name is a superstar or not or what he's going. Who can we trade for? Who can we make a move for? And I think they will bring in somebody who has at least some upside and say, okay, at least we added somebody to this roster because we desperately needed to. I don't think it's a name we've talked about yet, unless it's Treylon Burks, but I think that they will just look at it and say, who is available? We're going to go get that guy. Crazy to think that?
No, I think that the closer you get to training camp, like you mentioned, the depth is just, you have a lot of names, but you don't have a lot of high quality names. So that depth is concerning. And I think that, like you mentioned, you're one injury away. And a lot of these players might be being brought in to learn the offense or to get used to and familiar with the quarterback, because as Omar Khan said last year, as Mike Tomlin said last year, we like to bring in some veterans for the practice squad in the, instance in case of some of those injuries. You have veterans there and you don't have to rely on rookies and young guys. So perhaps that's what they're doing. But I think that the later it gets into this summer, if there's no other options, I think that they'd get more willing to open up what they would offer to get another player in. So to that aspect, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I just look at I think that they have a plan now. They have a plan long term. I don't think anything's worked out in their favor right now. And I just, to be honest, I also think that the Steelers had a plan when it came to San Francisco, that they wanted Brandon Ayuk. I think that one was real. I think once that kind of fell apart, they didn't have a backup plan. I think the media created all the backup plans. I think we all talked about the Cortland Suttons and the Deebo Samuel and the DK Metcalf. I think that was all us. I think that was all just, hey, this name makes sense. Let's talk about this name now. And I think the Steelers are still figuring out their backup plan. Like, I think that that's a real thing, because there's like, I've seen like one report saying the Denver Broncos turned down an offer from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I didn't believe that report. I believe certain reports. I don't believe others. The DK Metcalf called about DK Metcalf. I don't believe that for the life of me. There's no part of me that believes the Pittsburgh Steelers called the Seattle Seahawks before June 1st and said, hey, are you interested in trading DK Metcalf? I don't believe that for a second. I believe the Brandon Ayuk stuff. And I believe that was their plan A, and they thought that they were going to be able to do it, and it didn't happen. So now they're sitting here and waiting for option 2 to come around, and I think it will come around. And I think they'll find themselves in a position where they make a move, and it won't be a big splashy name, but it'll be a name that comes through and that makes some sense. And to be honest, there are teams out there. I mean, look at the Denver Broncos, dude. You could go get Tim Patrick. You could go get little Jordan Humphreys. They're not splashy names, but they started last season for the Broncos. They have starting experience. They have familiarity with Russell Wilson. They're going to go for absolutely nothing, and they're both on one-year deals. That's a good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just think that there are a bunch of options out there that make sense, and we will see something at some point. I do very much so believe. There's another name I want to talk about, but first, let's answer Michael's question here. Who has more impact year one, Troy or Zach Frazier? Who do you think makes the biggest year 2 leap, JPJ or Keanu Benton? Ooh, I'm gonna let you take this one first. Troy Fautanu or Zach Frazier, biggest impact year 1, biggest year 2 leap, Joey Porter Jr. or Keanu Benton?
Biggest year 1 impact is going to be Zach Frazier, in my opinion. Not saying he's the better of the 2 prospects, but looking at the position wise, there is conversations already of Dan Moore starting at left tackle and easing in Troy Fautanu, whereas they don't really have anybody at the center position. So there's a chance that Zach Frazier is the only guy that they're going to go to be the day 1 starter. So I think just by that instance, he is going to be the bigger impact in year 1, because he is going to be the guy they go to from day 1 to be that center position. Whereas at the left or tackle positions, they might be switching things around with Dan Moore Jr. And then as far as year 2 jump, I think probably as far as compared to what they did in year 1, I'm going to go Keanu Benton because I think he's going to get many more opportunities. Whereas JPJ by the end of the year was the number one cornerback. I think he's going to continue to improve, but I think the jump from what we saw last year to this year, Keanu Benton's going to get more opportunities. Therefore, it's going to seem like he makes a much bigger jump and is a much bigger part of the Steelers defense.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree 100%. I think Zach Frazier, like it's been a long time since the Steelers have had quality center play. I am so excited to see quality center play. I think Zach Frazier makes the immediate impact for this team. I'm also not totally certain that Troy Fautanu is going to start week 1 yet. I mean, like I'm almost certain he's going to start by the end of the season. I'm not certain he's going to start week 1. Zach Frazier is going to start week 1. I'd give it a 99.9% chance that happens. When it goes to the second year leap, I think the biggest difference is going to be this. Teams are going to have to game plan against Joey Porter Jr. Keanu Benton is still a little bit of an unknown commodity. There are not a lot of teams that saw what Keanu Benton could do to disrupt their offense last year when everybody saw Joey Porter Jr. take out number 1 wide receivers left and right. And I think he'll continue to do that, but I think Keanu Benton's going to come in here and really take that year 2 leap and be a monster for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. Whereas I think offenses are going to work a lot harder to escape the Joey Porter Jr. situation and maybe either avoid him or find ways to work around his skill sets and his weaknesses to get guys open. So I would say Keanu Benton and Zach Frazier. I agree with both of those 100%. And then Keyshawn, we appreciate you. The Steelers addressed the offensive line and quarterback positions. They drafted a round 2 graded wide receiver. I think we're panicking too quickly. Do you think that people are panicking too quickly about the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver position as of right now? I don't think anybody should be panicking about the offense as a whole. I think the offense as a whole is in a really good spot. I think the wide receiver position has a massive question mark because all it takes is one injury to be stranded with a rookie wide receiver, which is not something any Super Bowl contender is going to want to be.
Yeah, I mean, as far as whether people are panicking or not, I think the problem lies in the names that were brought in to supplement. I mean, whenever they sign one of those 4th wide receiver, 5th wide receiver names, everybody's saying, all right, well, if that's what you think the team needs at this point, that's concerning. But at the same time, I will say the one thing that we talked about on Tuesday is if you have George Pickens being able to be that 1,000+ receiver, you don't need another 1,000+ yard receiver. Nope. You have guys like Roman Wilson that maybe, you get 600-700 yards from him. If you can get Calvin Austin to take that jump, if you can get Pat Freiermuth to actually be a weekly contributor to your offense, which he wasn't the last couple seasons with Matt Canada, then you're fine. Then you don't need to go out, and you certainly don't need to go out and get a superstar. I just feel like you need to get somebody else in that Van Jefferson role. I mean, I don't know if Cordero Patterson is going to be able to even play that, although he's going to be more of a gadget guy used in different ways, more running back 3/wide receiver 4. But I think you need another bona fide X. And that's not saying you need another star. You just need somebody else that's going to be able to get open and create opportunities for other players on the field. And I just don't see Van Jefferson as that. And I certainly don't see Quez Watkins or Scotty Miller or Dez Fitzpatrick is that as well. So I don't think it's a panic at this point. I think the depth is a little worrisome, and I think there's one position that you need an upgrade over, and it shouldn't be hard to upgrade over Van Jefferson. But at this point of the offseason, it's a matter of where you find those type of guys.
Yeah, exactly. I think exactly what you said. Like there's the part about creating plays for other people. Like the Steelers, if George Pickens cannot, something happens. And again, that's worst case scenario, knock on wood. You got to pray it doesn't happen, but this is the NFL and I mean, the Steelers have dealt with this year after year after year when it comes to positions. You don't want to find yourself there with the wide receiver position. And you could say, hey, there's a bunch of gadget guys and Roman Wilson's this and Roman Wilson's that. You don't want to find yourself where your offense is predictable. And that is where the Steelers have been, and that is where they want to avoid is, okay, George Pickens isn't on the field, which means that the Steelers only have options to do 2 things: run short yardage plays with their wide receivers, utilize their gadget guys, or run the football. That's predictable. You can figure that out easily. That's what the Steelers are trying to avoid. You have to have playmakers across the field that could do different things. Then you could spread teams out and make things more difficult for everybody. I think that's where the panic comes in, is that, it's too early. You got to see what happens, and I still expect something to happen. But you gotta find a way to keep your offense unpredictable. And right now, if something happened, it would be very predictable what the Pittsburgh Steelers would do moving forward. All right, let's toss a funny name out there real quick, see how the people react. Martavis Bryant's a free agent. You're gonna go sign him? If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're just gonna keep adding guys who shouldn't make NFL rosters and bring Martavis Bryant to Pittsburgh?
I mean, it would be great for the social media clips over the summer, but outside of that, I'm not exactly sure what he brings to your roster once fall kicks in. Like it's an interesting name, certainly. Would it have been nice to have him back in the day when he was still the alien? Yeah, I don't know if he is that anymore.
No, there's no chance he's that. He's 32 years old.
Yeah.
He hasn't played football in the NFL since 2018. There's no chance. I will say this. If I had to guess where he ends up, it's Kansas City. And if I had to guess whether or not he wins a Super Bowl before the Pittsburgh Steelers win their next Super Bowl, man, it'd be really upsetting, but it could happen. Could you imagine if Juju, Antonio Brown, and Martavis Bryant all won Super Bowls elsewhere? I think, no, Le'Veon Bell. Did Le'Veon Bell win a Super Bowl with Kansas City? No, I don't think he did. I think he was off the team by then. If all three of those guys won Super Bowls before the Pittsburgh Steelers won their next. That's just to talk about bad luck. And none of them, let's not get it wrong, none of them won the Super Bowl. They all were just contributors to the greatest quarterback of all time and potentially the second greatest, becoming the greatest quarterback of all time in Patrick Mahomes. Wild. But he's a name and everybody's going to talk about it, so we had to toss it out there too. Martavis Bryant, man. I mean, he's not a gadget guy. He's not a gadget guy. That's the only thing. It's the only thing you got to talk about. All right, let's talk linebacker here. Cole Holcomb update on Cole Holcomb a little bit. ESPN's Brooke Pryor was on the Adam and Gold show yesterday talking about what the update is with Cole Holcomb. She said, quote, "My understanding is it's not just a simple ACL tear and they're being very vague on what the specific injury is. We can't know what she bases her understanding on, of course, but this is part of my story. Being very vague about the Pittsburgh Steelers inside linebacker dealing with more than an ACL injury. You look at Cole Holcomb, there's been no updates. You look at their additions, it kind of points to Cole Holcomb may not be ready for the season. I mean, is there any concern that Cole Holcomb doesn't play the first half of the 2024 season? And do the Steelers have the pieces in place to kind of figure it out without him?
I mean, they have the starters. They have the young rookie in Peyton Wilson, somebody who's taken a lot of snaps at NC State, so he certainly has experience at the collegiate level. Yeah. The question I have with that is, how much are you going to put on him early? Because we saw this happen with the Steelers last year at inside linebacker. If you lose two, all of a sudden you're down to Peyton Wilson and Mark Robinson. I mean, that's highly concerning. So you're putting a lot and you're banking a lot on that position being healthy. But I mean, heck, who knows? Maybe they can call up Miles Jack out of retirement again to go out there and play for 3 weeks until Cole Holcomb's ready to go. But it is concerning that we're at this point of the offseason and there's no positive news coming out. It's not, oh, he's progressing along, we like where he's at. It's just, yeah, we're going to keep that close to the vest. And that's a little concerning. Now, if all healthy, the Steelers have 4 really solid inside linebackers. One being a rookie, you don't know what you're going to get out of Peyton Wilson, but with Wilson being a rookie and with Holcomb being unsure about when he's going to return, it does raise a little bit of a concern. But at the same time, you still do have 2 very solid starters in Patrick Queen and Elandon Roberts. And I think they do things separately that help make your defense a little bit more flexible to taking on certain opponents.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it to some degree leaves the door open for another addition at the inside linebacker room. Like if you go to training camp and Cole's still not where you think he could be, you could look at guys like Quan Alexander. If you want to bring him back, you could call guys that are off the streets. That inside linebacker, there's always veterans sitting around who could give you 8 to 10 games of really good quality play. And I think that's the Steelers. That's what they're looking for if they need anybody. Cole Holcomb dealing with the massive injury stinks because let me tell you, like Elandon Roberts is a stud. And I think Elandon Roberts is potentially my favorite player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like he's really up there. Patrick Queen, Cole Holcomb, and Peyton Wilson long-term are scary. Like that is such an athletic group of inside linebackers that fixes exactly what the Steelers have been looking for. And Cole Holcomb kind of dealing with that. I mean, it leaves some concern about the future of how they look at him and what it means to this roster. And can he bounce back? Can he be as athletic? I mean, that's 2 seasons in a row, a knee injury and then a foot injury. And you're just not, you're not looking good for the future of Cole Holcomb. Concerning place to be, but just like you said, they have the pieces in place. I think it gives Peyton Wilson an opportunity to kind of showcase himself early, which I'm very excited to see. You know, I think Peyton Wilson could come in here and be an immediate contributor. I think there's a shot Peyton Wilson comes in here and starts while Landon Roberts is just like the thumper number 3 inside linebacker, which is, I think that's what fits him best. I think if you put a Landon Roberts in on first down and, you know, 3rd and short and just say, go hit somebody as hard as you could possibly hit somebody, that is where a Landon Roberts shines. And I think that that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers have with those 3 if they go out there. But again, he's a rookie. Wilson's a rookie. You don't know what you're going to get out of him immediately and how much he needs to develop. So it would have been nice to have Cole Holcomb. Either way, not looking good. I would not expect Cole Holcomb to be ready by week 1. Just my understanding and the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of being so vague about it and their messages to us, I would not expect Cole Holcomb to be ready week 1 as we sit here. But again, I think it leaves the door open for another exciting signing like Quan Alexander, who I also loved because I thought he was a good dude in the locker room and a phenomenal player on the field. All right, before we head out of here, let's answer everybody's questions.
Let's start with Aaron Griffith, who asks, what are your thoughts on the former offensive lineman saying Tomlin is on the hot seat? Do you think that an extension is in the works in Pittsburgh?
The extension is, I'm surprised that an extension hasn't happened yet between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin, but that's okay because we all know it's going to happen once I'm on either my bachelor party or my honeymoon. Either one of those, I would guess, is the time that Mike Tomlin gets a contract extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is not on the hot seat. Mike Tomlin, this is the thing about Mike Tomlin. I joke about it constantly. He said to us at the owners meeting, and I made a massive joke about it, massive joke. And I still joke about it to this day. He said, I live in discomfort. I love living in discomfort. And my mind immediately went, dude, you would never lose this job no matter what you did. No matter what you did, you'd always have job security. That is not discomfort. You don't know what discomfort is, pal. You're staying at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, Florida, while I'm down the street at the Hut Shack hanging out with everybody off the street. And you're talking about discomfort? That's where my mind went. Mike Tomlin is the farthest thing from the hot seat. I mean, look, you're not going to, the Pittsburgh Steelers they would laugh at the thought of Mike Tomlin being on the hot seat. Art Rooney would laugh at the thought of Mike Tomlin being on the hot seat. Omar Khan would laugh at the thought of Mike Tomlin being on the hot seat. It would never happen. He's not on the hot seat. He's not, it's not even warm. The expectations in Pittsburgh are warm. They got to start winning playoff games, but they're not getting rid of Mike Tomlin if they don't win a playoff game this year.
Noah Thomas wants to know, is no trade or addition better than making a bad trade or getting a big contract for the wrong guy?
Yeah, 100%. Always. I think that if you took on a guy like Deebo Samuel for a massive amount of money or Cortland Sutton for a massive amount of money and you put yourself in a hole for 2 or 3 years and you're kind of taking a shot at a guy who's already past his prime and just sitting there at the end of his prime, maybe. I think that's too big of a risk. I think Brandon Ayuk makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, you're looking at 4 years before that contract's gone, and you don't know what's going to happen in those 4 years. That's a massive question mark. I think to sit here and just say there are smaller options, better, smaller options is the way to go if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Broderick Wallace wants to know, do you agree that Najee and Dan Moore Jr. are on the trading block?
I don't. I agree that Dan Moore is going to be on the trading block. I would expect Dan Moore to be traded by the start of the season. Najee is not on the trading block. I've been told that Najee's not on the trading block. I've been told that the rumors or the speculation or whatever about, I saw the NFL rumors account tweet out Najee Harris has interest from the Dallas Cowboys, which you should never believe those Twitter accounts. And I just texted it to a source and I just said, LOL. And they called me and they said, you don't even have to put anything out because anybody who believes this should not be believing this. And I said, yeah, no, I'm aware. Najee Harris is not on the trading block. I would say there's no chance he ends up anywhere else besides Pittsburgh in 2024.
Richard Hunt wants to know, if you're going for a mid to high tier wide receiver, which player would you trade to another team not named Dan Moore? Do you see the Steelers including a player instead of just picks if they end up trying to trade for another wide receiver?
I don't, to be honest with you. I don't see them trading a player for a big name wide receiver. I think that puts you in an even tougher spot. Maybe Calvin Austin. Maybe Calvin Austin, if you're just gonna like give a little to get a little. But I don't think that there's a name out there. I don't think the Steelers have enough depth anywhere to say we'll make this move and we'll include this guy without giving up a key piece to the puzzle or a key piece to the roster in exchange for another key piece. And I think that they're not willing to do that. I would say that if they kept Kenny Pickett around, Kenny Pickett would have been a name that could have been there, but they don't have, there's like not a position where you look at it and go, there's enough depth here to trade somebody away. I just don't think that they have it.
Another question here. Do you think there's still a possibility that the Steelers are in on DK Metcalf? I know you talked about it earlier, but do you think overall there's still a possibility they go for DK maybe after June 1st?
I would say no. I would say DK is not an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have not been told that they called the Seattle Seahawks. I haven't checked on them calling the Seattle Seahawks because I don't believe that they called the Seattle Seahawks. And quite frankly, there's a name. Somebody just tossed a name out there at the bottom in DeMarvin Leal for the last question. That's a good one. I don't see you're going to get much value for him for a wide receiver trade, but I could see you getting a pick for him. I see DeMarvin Leal as a guy that could be on his way out as well. But I could also see all right, I'll address this, then we'll go back. I apologize. So we'll go DeMarvin Leal. I think I could see DeMarvin Leal bouncing to the outside this year and them testing it out there. That's why they haven't added a fourth outside linebacker and seeing if he works on the outside as that fourth guy, that run stuffer guy. And if it works, cool. If not, they get rid of him. But I think they're going to test DeMarvin Leal out on the outside before they do anything with them. But that is a very interesting name when it comes to a trade. Yeah. DK Metcalf. I haven't been told, like I've been getting calls every time the Steelers have made a call about somebody. When it comes to a trade, if they've called for somebody, I get a phone call. And I have not heard anything about DK Metcalf, and I just don't believe that the Steelers want DK Metcalf. Like, I think he'd be a phenomenal name, but he's more expensive than anybody else that they could go after. He's going to need a bigger contract extension because he's only got 2 years on his current deal, and he's still young enough to get another deal moving forward. That's the thing with Deebo Samuel is like you're going to rock out the last 2 years of his contract before you negotiate a new one. DK Metcalf's going to need a new contract or a contract extension next offseason. That's just, it's too much to be giving up what they're going to have to give up for him. I don't think DK Metcalf's a real possibility for the Steelers.
We got one more wide receiver question here. This one from Ant Mitchell says, could you take a trade for the 49ers, Juwan Jennings?
Juwan Jennings is a very interesting name. I thought he was an option for the Steelers before the season or before the offseason started, before he re-signed in San Francisco. I mean, my only issue there is he's another slot guy. How many slot guys? Just slot guys everywhere. Just line 12 dudes up in the slot or 11 dudes up in the slot, 10 dudes up in the slot, and then Russell Wilson just snap it to himself. Who cares? And that'll work. I like Juwan Jennings a lot. I would be interested in that name. I don't know. I don't know what the Steelers' plans are. I'm not going to say no because I think that the Steelers could look at him and say he fits what we're looking for because they've clearly identified that they're looking for slot guys. They just want all the slot guys. And Juwan Jennings is as good as it gets in the slot, and he's cheap, and I think he's much better than his value says he is. And on top of that, the 49ers got a lot of wide receivers, so why not give up one of them? I could say yes.
The last one we have as of right now is from Aaron Ball. He says, if our roster was to stay exactly how it is right now, what is the floor and the ceiling of this team in the win column?
Oh, that is a good question. So I'm going to say the floor is, I don't know, 9 wins. It's always 9 wins. With Mike Tomlin running the show, it's 9 wins. The floor is a winning season. Like, I'm not going to change my answer there. I don't even think I have to look at the schedule to say it's 9 wins. And with the defense that you have and with the running game that you have and the new offensive coordinator, I just think 9 wins. I think 9 wins is good enough. Like, I think that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers could stand. The ceiling, oh man, I would say the ceiling is potentially 13 wins, 12, 13 wins. Like, I think that's a good place to be. I don't think you're going to win every game. I think you are going to drop one to Cincinnati. Probably you might drop one to Cleveland. I don't know who else is on the roster right now, but I would expect, like, they have the hardest or one of the hardest schedules in the NFL. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think losing 4 to 5 games is realistic. And I would say 12, 13 wins is the floor. But you got to remember, 13 wins gets you the number 1 seed in the AFC last season. So that's a good place to be if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would say 12 to 13 wins.
And the last question, we actually had one jump in right now. Anthony asks, any cornerback news? Sorry if I missed anything. So is there anything else on the cornerback front for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
No, nothing right now. I have not heard anything about the corners in Pittsburgh. I think that they're going to look at it and see what they get in Beanie Bishop and where Corey Trice is and Darius Rush. And they're going to test those guys out in OTAs and minicamp and rookie minicamp and see what they got. And then they're going to go from there. You know, I still think that DeMonte KZ is an option to move up. I think Deshaun Elliott is an option to move up. If I had to guess who the most realistic coming to Pittsburgh guy is Cam Sutton. I'm still going to say it's Cam Sutton. It makes too much sense for both sides for it to be Cam Sutton, even if people aren't going to be happy about it. I would say Cam Sutton's the most realistic one, but I think they're going to test out everybody they have first before they do that.
We do have one more here that we talked about on Tuesday, could provide an update now. So when is the schedule dropping?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I'm guessing I've been told it's next Wednesday, but I was told it was today a week ago. So I'm going to guess it's next Wednesday. This is what I've told the NFL. Okay. And obviously the NFL listens to me, and I didn't actually tell the NFL this, but I need them to know if they are listening to this. I go on my bachelor party next Thursday, okay? Which means that I cannot be dropping schedules. I will be drinking beer all day long. I'll be golfing all day long. I'll be smoking cigars all day long. I don't have time to be sitting around watching NFL Network waiting for the Steelers schedule to drop. It's got to drop Wednesday. So I'm going to go Wednesday, May 15th. That's my guess. That's my guess.
We'll finish it off with this one. Ark asks, what do you think of bringing in Shaq or Carl Lawson to bolster the defensive line?
I like both of them. I think if they could play on it's like it doesn't fit the scheme of what the Steelers play. They play more like a defensive end Myles Garrett role, but I think that they could come in here and fit what the Steelers are doing. They could possibly work off the edge. I think that I think a lot of guys who are just talented at rushing the passer could make that work, especially later in their career. I see both of them as a better DeMarvin Leal, so a much better DeMarvin Leal. I don't want to disrespect Shaq or Carl Lawson. So I see them as an option there, but I don't know. Carl Lawson would be my guess if I had to guess either of them, because Carl Lawson is, I mean, Mike Tomlin has always talked super highly about Carl Lawson and who he is as a player. So I could see that, but I'm not going to guess either of them end up in Pittsburgh. I think Bud Dupree or Marcus Golden are better options right now, but I think they're going to test DeMarvin Leal, and that's just a guess. But I'm going to guess that they're going to test DeMarvin Leal.
And that's all we have for this one.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we're going to head out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. We have a blast on these live streams as we do every single Tuesday and Thursday. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Subscribe anywhere you get your audio podcast. And as we've been saying, please go check out our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk clips. We will be back tomorrow before we head to rookie minicamp. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.